Now, the study that we did was, and the reason for the study was it was a study on what happened after we made changes to the federal milk marketing orders in 2000, and there was no agenda besides to say that the work would be independent, and that there was no policies that were in preconceived notions that we're trying to work towards. We're just trying to understand the facts, and if we could understand the facts, then maybe we could do something about them. And one of the most challenging, or maybe stark, I'm not sure what the right word is, conclusions from the study, which is something that you all have lived pretty every day, is that the Southeast and the Appalachian regions, they have been some of the most challenged dairy regions in the U.S. since 2000. And I think all of you producers in the room and on this call, you are all stars, and you have friends or colleagues or neighbors that are no longer in the dairy business. And I'm going to go through the key findings from that study. But the thing that I think is probably most clear and most relevant as we start talking about policy and preparing for this policy conversation is that your region of the country has had pretty significant challenges, and I would argue more challenges than probably any other region in the country. So we're going to go through the findings of the study, and I'm going to try and make it clear that this is a presentation about facts. This is not a presentation about policy, and that those are steps to come. So first, just a review of what the study was. I think it ended up being over 40 pages. It examined the dairy industry in the Southeast and Appalachian regions over the last 20 or so years. What happened? What were the facts? Was that what the industry had intended to have happen? And the regions that we covered in this report was the Appalachian order and the Southeast order. Obviously, Tennessee kind of falls in the midst of both of those. And the whole premise for the study was, can we find and uncover just an agreed upon fact base about what's happened, and then we can start asking questions. Is that what are those outcomes that were good? Are those outcomes that were bad? Were they good for some people? Were they bad for some people? Maybe were there ambitions that we should have had that we didn't? And those questions are particularly timely today as we are talking about federal order reform. So we have senators that are crafting bills saying USDA should hold hearings on federal orders. As I mentioned before, we have the largest dairy trade associations have already put together committees. And one of the things that I'm finding in the conversation and where the conversations are at is that I see a lot of policies that are proposed or thrown around, but in what I think is a bit of putting the cart before the horse. And what I think is, to commend this group is, I think we've done it a little differently, is that they're not starting with issues and then generating policies to address those issues. They are starting with policies, and it seems like we're trying to back into issues. So I'm going to go through the findings of the study, and I kind of want you to think about it from that lens. Are these issues? Do we agree that these are issues? And one of the things that I don't want is to start at what I consider to be the second step, which is start with policies. In my work on this multiple component pricing, transportation credits, diversions. Some of these things are all very hot topics and generate a lot of opinions. And I don't think that we should. I'm not sure that we're there yet. I think we're at the step before that, which is we have to identify the issues that we want to address in the first place, in the things that for the region certainly have been challenges. Now, I put together this slide. I know it's simple, but I think it's a helpful model that if we want to create policies and make changes to milk marketing, the right way to do it is to start with the principle, to start with the problem, to start with the issue that we're trying to address. And then once we can agree that this is the issue, then we should be proposing policies. There's a lot of different ways to skin a cat. And there's a lot of different ways in policies to address specific issues. And then may the best policy win. Excuse me. What I mean by that is, well, once you have the issue that you're trying to address, and then you have hopefully a set of policies that, or a number of different policies that would address that issue, then go and evaluate them and say, this is what I think is the best policy solution for the problem, and that is as an industry what we should be working for. And if you go down that three-step process of identifying the issue, proposing solutions, and then picking the best one, then you can unify around that, and it's consistent. And if you do get achieve the policy outcome that you were hoping for, well, then there's a pretty good chance that you also achieved resolving the issue that you wanted to address to begin with. So in that aim, I want to talk about the key conclusions from the study and the issues that should be addressed. And I kind of want to frame it as these key conclusions from the study as the idea of, are these issues that we want to address? So here were the five key ones, and I'm going to go through each one individually. Issue number one, consolidation in the region has outpaced national averages. So I think it's no surprise to anybody that you go anywhere in the US, frankly, in most places in the world, we have fewer larger farms. That's been a trend that's been in place for decades and decades. The reason why I identify it as issue number one is because in the Southeast and Appalachian regions is that consolidation has happened faster into a larger extent, meaning there are more farms that have gone out of business than the national average, than in other places. If that continues, if that trend remains in place, well, then you'll have even fewer neighbors, even fewer friends that used to be, that'll fall into that category of used to be farmers. So the first issue identified in the study was that consolidation in the region has outpaced national averages. Often when talking with people or the industry, onlookers, spectators, is they'll say, well, that's because fluid milk sales have declined, and the Southeast Appalachian regions, the East Coast of the US, the East in general, has been very dependent on fluid milk sales, and those have declined. And that's kind of the story that gets told. But when we dug into the data, and when I dug into the data, the second conclusion was actually milk production fell faster in the Southeast than fluid milk declined. Fluid milk sales declined. And what that means is that local milk producers have lost market share to other parts, farmers in other parts of the country. So issue one, consolidation is outpacing the national average, and issue number two is that milk production has decreased faster than we've lost fluid milk sales, meaning that there's been a market share decline. Issue number three, milk pooled in the Southeastern region has migrated to be further away. And I'm going to show you that right now. We can get this to work here. So this is the Appalachian order over time, and each one of these dots is the share of milk in that county that is part of the order. And you can see when it flips to 2000, you have all these small dots in Tennessee and Kentucky, and you get fewer bigger dots. But you also see that milk is moving away from the population centers over time. Where is the share gaining? It's gaining in northern Indiana. It's gaining in Michigan. And so we talked about that idea, or I mentioned that you're losing market share. Well, that's where you're losing market share too. Similarly, if you look at the southeast border, you can see over time the milk moving further and further away, which at least from my perspective seems to have questionable economics. Why does it make sense to ship fluid milk more distance? That seems like maybe there's some policy that influenced that. But from an industry perspective, and as an issue for you guys in Tennessee, or the producers in the Southeast in general, you're missing out to the benefit of other regions. And if we're gonna put on a hat and say, well, what's in the best interest for you guys, I think that I would certainly put that on the list of that seems problematic, and certainly for the detriment of local producers. So issue number 1, 2, and 3, they start singing a song that seems similar. We have consolidation that's outpacing the national average. We have milk, we're losing market share. We're seeing milk migrate out of the region. And then, of course, it's of no surprise, issue number 4, that farm gate compensation has declined over time. And I think just about everybody is probably saying, well, no duh. That's a discovery. And I think that's kind of the wrong perspective, is that what we're trying to do is we're trying to identify the issues that if we're going to create policy, that these would be the things that we'd like to change. And then lastly, issue number 5 in conclusion from the study is that there is evidence that surplus milk from outside the region has come in and suppressed milk in the region. And you can go and read the report, which shows that when there was milk being dumped in the Northeast and the Mideast, that we saw pressure on farm gate margins in the Appalachian and Southeast. But that, as an issue, to no fault of producers in the Southeast and Appalachian regions, prices were suppressed by, at least I say there's evidence that prices have been suppressed by milk from other places. So let's take those 5 issues that were identified in the study. We have above average consolidation. We have losing market share. You have milk migration. You have lower farm gate compensation, and evidence of milk from outside the region suppressing local milk prices, especially during times of surplus. And I want to take those and I want to turn them into, what does that mean for what types of policy solutions? So we're going from what we're findings, what were the facts, and trying to say, well, what kind of what types of policy solutions would you be looking for if you were trying to change those things? And there's consolidation in the region has outpaced national averages. Well, then what you'd be wanting to do is you'd want to create a policy that would maybe slow that consolidation. Milk production in the Southeast has fallen faster than fluid milk sales have declined. Well, we'd want to reverse that trend, right? We'd want a policy that would help us regain share of those fluid milk sales. We've had milk migrate away from the Appalachian and Southeast regions. Well, we'd want a policy that brought back milk to the Southeast, that reversed the migration. we've had farm gate compensation decline. Well, that's a trend that we don't like. We would like to propose policies that increase our farm gate compensation. And of course, if there's milk coming in from outside the region that is suppressing our milk prices, well, then we would seek policies that reduce that surplus and their effect on our prices. So, the findings from the study, they weren't necessarily, it wasn't rocket science. It isn't totally earth shattering, but when you put it into a process and say, well, if we look at trends that happen and we don't, we can identify the ones that we don't like or we'd like to change, then we can identify the types of policies we'd want then, which we're not going to do today, but you can identify specific policies that might address those issues, and then you can go and pick the best one. So that was all, that's it for the presentation. I tried to shorten it so that, I know that I'm coming after lunch and I have a hard time, holding attention spans. But I was hopeful that this presentation of where we're going through the findings of the study and how we can go and implement them at a time where the time for implementation is increasingly nigh. We're almost there. And we have the facts to begin with that I think can help inform that conversation and that we're prepared for success. So with that, Stan, I'll turn it back over to you or take questions.
Thanks, Matt. Do we have any questions from the room or in the chat? All right. Can you show me this? All right. So question on Zoom, what policy do you think lead to changes and where the milk was coming from? Yeah, what policy do you think led to changes and where the milk was coming from? Sorry, brain's not working yet.
Yeah, and I'm not sure that I can give the final conclusive answer. I also don't think that it is necessarily one policy that, one specific attribute of federal orders that has created this. I think they kind of, work as an amalgamation. But, I guess the first thing is we identified, right, the point of this process was to identify the facts, that it is very clear that since 2000, we have experienced a migration. So, what would cause that migration? Well, there's a lot of factors that matter. I think maybe I'm going to try very hard to sidestep the idea that of creating policy or recommending policy. But the challenge, I guess, that I would give is that I don't know that that's necessarily the right question. I think the right question is what policies could we propose that would bring milk back into the region. And I know that's a little bit of a non-answer. And the reason why it's a bit of a non-answer is that you can't actually just look at just one part of the order reforms and say it's that. So when you think about the policy choices that you would have to implement in order to get a different outcome, it's not necessarily even going to be one thing either.
Thanks, Matt. Any more questions from the room about the presentation?
Is the fifth one, is it changing?
The question from the room was the fifth point. Is that changing or is that pretty stagnant?
Yeah, and just to pulled up the fifth point is there is evidence that surplus milk from outside the region has suppressed milk prices in the area. And so I think of this in two different ways. The first is, is there a lot of distressed milk around? What you might call surplus milk. And we saw record dumping, certainly in the pandemic, but also years before that in both the Northeast and the Mideast. And so since, of course, over the last several months, as milk production nationally has tightened up, these areas have not been immune from that. I mean, milk production was contracting during the latest month. And so the surpluses in these regions have certainly decreased. And then you add in things like that new cheese plant in Michigan, which absorbs 8 million pounds of milk per day. The environment that we're in, the economic environment that we're in has changed, and that has decreased. However, there's also a point to be made that we just went through a period of time where the surplus milk from other areas weighed very heavy on local prices. And so should that change and we get back to a situation where there is a lot of surplus milk and there is even dumping going on in the Northeast and Mideast, we would expect that to come back and again weigh on prices again. So there's the environment has changed, but the underpinnings of how milk marketing works still remain. So if we go back to if we look out 3 years and we're back in a surplus situation, well, you certainly will feel that surplus again.
Thanks, Matt. We have another question online, and the question was, is the report available for viewing anywhere?
It is. Stan, can you answer that question?
The question was, is the report available to view anywhere? Okay. Not currently, but we can make it available.
It is on our website.
It's on TPDA's website?
Yeah, but
Okay.
now, it may not be as current, so we'll have to look for it.
Okay. More questions from the room? Now that everybody's food's starting to digest back there.
It's a good meal.
It was a good meal. It was
So,
really good.
Matt, can you, in a timely manner, address the possibility of benefits for state unit pooling for the needed milk that's coming from the outside to support that versus encouraging local milk? And down the road, then if that's in place, and those who are benefit first for the needed milk, and would that not prevent the dumping of excess milk that took place in the last 2 or 3 years?
Did you get all that?
So, I got most of it. So let's start with, so what Stan asked is, he said, how would the implementation of state unit pooling affect either federal, the Appalachian order or the Southeast? And would that have prevented some of the impacts of the surplus milk that's been experienced over the last several years? State unit pooling is a set of rules that exists in Federal Order 1, but without going into details, we can kind of simplify them as state unit pooling prevents, there are a set of rules that prevent milk from far away or milk from outside the region from being part of your order. So the reason why I'm sure Stan brought this up is, if one of the issues that we identified was that milk has migrated away, meaning, I think you can see like on, if I go and pull that up, I'll pull that up. The milk that migrated to Northwest Texas, for example, which is very far away. Here we go, I'm sorry. You can see the milk migration over time. If you had changed the rules so that it would favor milk that was produced locally, in the case in the Northeast, they have this thing called state unit pooling, which is the rules are such that it tends to keep the milk in the state in their own local order. But I'm not sure that the details of state unit pooling matter so much as the concept of you creating a rule that favors local milk at to the detriment, I suppose, of milk further away. If you had implemented a rule like that, or if your order had a rule that favored local milk, would that have reduced the effects of surplus milk in other areas? I think the answer to that is very likely yes. It probably goes without saying that if you have a system in place that whatever the rules may be, that were created to benefit the local milk supply. It's going to benefit the local milk supply. Now, the one reason why I think state unit pooling is attractive, or one of the reasons, is because there's already precedent for it and it already exists in a part of the country. And so, I could see why that would certainly attract attention. But again, just to restate it so that, in case anyone got lost, is that state unit pooling, which is what Stan brought up, is a set of rules that seek to benefit local milk and to prevent milk from far away from joining the order and participating in the order. And that if you implemented a set of policies that benefited local milk supplies in the Appalachian and the Southeast, it would be to the benefit of local milk as opposed to milk far away.
So a question just popped up on the chat. Since Tennessee and 7, how would this look in terms of state pooling?
Here, let me put my video back on so I'm not just a black box. I would start, the idea of state unit pooling is that, obviously states, maybe not obviously, or it can be a unit, or that you can create, and that there are rules that specify what also counts as a separate unit that can be part of the pool. But that the thresholds are high enough in order to create those units that that basically that the rules are intended and serve to prevent milk from far away joining. So yes, would you have to craft rules that worked for your order if you wanted that outcome? Absolutely. Does it take some amount of creativity? Yes. And am I ready to tell you how to write those rules? No. But is it possible? I think it's in the realm of possibilities. Yep. And then there's another question.
There is. The question is, it seems like the places milk is migrating to are heavy with non-fluid plants. Does that make a difference?
Does that? I think that maybe the way that it should be seen is that whatever the rules are that exist today, that over time that we're seeing that is the outcome, that milk is being put on the order from further away. And to your point, to areas, with non-fluid milk plants. So does that make it, does that make a difference? To me, I see that as, remember, we're starting from the perspective of what are the facts. And if there are facts that we don't like, well, then we propose policies to change those, with the attempt to try and change the facts going forward or put us on a different trend. So, there's nothing exclusive or something, I think, about that outcome. Okay. Well, thank you all very much.
Thank you.